UNBROKEN, a Sentinels and Guardians novel by Engle. Chapter 3. I explored the 4th floor, poking my head into mostly empty offices and bathrooms and supply rooms, all without stumbling upon anything unusual, including the mystery girl who had allegedly frozen Carl to the wall. Of the rooms I could open, most were empty of furnishings or still under construction. The rest all belonged to the Quentin V. Ziegler law firm. I asked each time I ran into someone if they had seen a young girl. No one confirmed that they had. When I asked why the floor seemed so quiet, I was told that Mr. Ziegler, God rest his soul, had passed away. The funeral was today. A few minutes of fruitless searching passed, and I felt my worries growing. While entertaining, the short interlude with Carl might have cost precious time, and I worried that whatever trouble I was here to prevent had already come and gone. It also occurred to me that I hadn't stumbled upon Harrison yet. The floor was large, so it was quite probable that I hadn't caught up to him, but when I found a janitor's closet empty of gray-haired, dark-skinned security guards, I couldn't help but wonder where he had gone off to. While I had warned him that things could get crazy around me, I doubted he had taken me seriously. The pantsed and frozen Carl belied the threatening situations that usually transpired around me. It wasn't until I had circled nearly all the way back to the hallway where I'd left Carl that I heard the commotion. Raised voices, a girl's scream, and the thud of something substantial hitting the floor, muted by the insulated walls. Had I been further down the hallway, the noise never would have registered. I ran to the door closest to the noise and was about to barge in when it was suddenly flung open. Harrison lurched through, ordering, "Get back!" He grabbed me and yanked me to the side, while simultaneously pulling the door shut. Thwack, thwack. 2 muted impacts hit the door. Thwack, thwack. 2 more impacts tore through the walls about a foot to the far side of the door, leaving behind 4 bullet-shaped holes. Harrison drove me to the ground. I landed on my back with a security guard sprawled over me, his arm covering my head, and had just enough left to my field of vision to see a new set of holes spitting drywall dust and insulation blossom in the wall mere inches over us. We stayed down, breathing hard and listening harder, for several seconds. When no more shots seemed to be coming, Harrison groaned and rolled off me. I sat up, and the first things I noticed were the macabre smears on the cream-colored carpet leading out from the office, and the pool slowly growing around Harrison's thigh. He dragged himself to a seated position with his back to one wall, giving him an angle on the door he'd come through as he raised his sidearm. Heavy footsteps approached from inside the office. Then nothing. Finally, a deep voice spoke. "If you're still alive and have any brains at all, you'll crawl out of here and keep quiet about what you saw. I can find you anywhere. And I will." The footsteps retreated. I caught a few more words as he moved away, spoken to someone else. "Gamma, code midnight. Lock it down." "I don't care. Just get it done." "You'll need to go for help," Harrison whispered, pain seeping through his voice. "My radio's not working, and I think he's got some kind of jamming device." "Are you going to be okay? Is the girl in there?" I asked. "She's in there somewhere, hiding. I went in when I heard the racket. He's tearing the place apart looking for her." Harrison didn't look at me as he spoke, but kept his gaze fixed on the door. The hand not holding his gun was clutching his left leg and getting a crimson bath. "I'll stay here. It's the only way out. Tell Brooke what's happened. She's the guard downstairs." "Okay," I said. I stole another glance at the bullet holes, a sight that felt surreal, then scrambled over to Harrison and started unlacing my sneakers. "What are you doing? Go," he hissed. The bullet had hit Harrison on the outside of his left leg, just above his knee. While I didn't think it looked too bad, I was hardly an expert. "Not yet," I said. It only took a couple seconds to finish unthreading the laces and slip off my sneakers. "Gonna raise your leg a bit." When he nodded, I stacked my sneakers under his ankle to elevate his leg. Then I peeled off my t-shirt, "Eat your heart out, ladies," and pressed it against his wound. "Here, hold this," I directed, indicating the t-shirt. While he did so, I looped the shoelaces around his thigh and tied the wadded cloth to where he'd sprung the leak. "Thank you, now go," Harrison ordered again. I got up to a crouch but stopped when he said, "Wait." "What?" "Don't let Brooke come up here," he said. "She'll call for help, but then she'll come up. Don't let her. And don't you come back either." "But—" He took his eyes off the door for only an instant, but the look he gave me was enough to silence my objections. What it was missing in duration, it made up for in intensity. I slipped off as quickly as I could without making too much noise. My stocking feet helped with that. There was a lot of banging around in the office, so I doubted the shooter would have heard me, but there was no sense in letting the armed man know someone else was here if he didn't already. After I turned the corner at the far end of the hallway, I dried my hands on my pant legs and pulled out my phone. Of course, no service. Was that due to the jammer Harrison had seen? I didn't know. What had trouble gotten me into this time? I started poking my head into random rooms again. The first one I checked was empty. There were a few phone and internet checks, but no actual phones. The second room I tried had a small vacant waiting room with a few chairs, a corner table covered in magazines, and a receptionist's desk. I hurried around the desk and found a headset connected to a phone. I held the receiver to my ear and listened. Nothing. The line was dead. When I punched in 911, I heard each number beep, but then nothing afterward. The phones were useless. I thumped a fist against the desktop in frustration. Harrison wanted me off the floor. He wanted me to get help and stay out of trouble. But I couldn't do that. Everything within me believed this was my job, my life now. Leaving wasn't an option. I didn't think I had trouble in my head just so I could send others into harm's way while I stood back and twiddled my thumbs. And tough as he might be, Harrison was in no condition to handle things solo. I briefly considered searching the floor and trying to get the few occupants out. But who was going to listen to a shirtless, shoeless 15-year-old in an upscale office building? I figured the civilians would be safer in their offices unaware. That left me with precisely one option. Option C. Option Carl. I found him right where I had left him. He heard me coming, craned his head around, and started making loud demands about the picture I had taken. He'd probably never even heard the gunshots. While not soundproof, the walls on this floor appeared designed to dampen noise, and the guy who had shot Harrison was almost certainly using a suppressor. "And where's your shirt?" Carl inquired, wrapping up his tirade. "Shh," I whispered forcefully. I hit the elevator call button. The light inside went out the moment I removed my finger. I pressed it again for the same result. I looked up at the floor display and saw that it, too, was unlit. Well, booger poop. Guess that leaves the stairs, I thought. I turned back around to face Carl. He was staring at my hands. I held my palms out and said, "Look, I only took the picture to show my brother. No one else will see it, I promise." Now, what to do about you, I pondered. I obviously couldn't leave him there, trapped and helpless and out in the open. Plus, I needed him if I was going to return to Harrison. Carl's coffee cup was nearly empty. A considerable wet spot had developed beneath his trapped arm, but there was still too much ice left for him to break free. Too bad the coffee hadn't made much of a dent in the block of ice. I thought about kicking it, but the jagged edges were likely to slice my foot open as though it were made of razors. Are you hurt?" Carl asked. "No, why?" I asked absently, my mind still planning his escape. I saw a way that might work to free him, but it might also be loud enough to draw unwanted attention. Then again, No one seemed to care yet about Carl's yelling, so... "There's blood on you." "Huh?" I raised my arms a little and saw Harrison's blood on my hands and wrists. "Oh, it's not mine. It's Mr. Harrison's." After a second to process that, Carl said, "Is he, looking like a big-shot action hero with a bullet in his leg? Too manly to complain and still determined to stop the bad guys and save the girl?" "Yep, pretty much. So we need to get you freezed to call in backup. Unfortunately, phones and elevators are down, so you're going to be taking the stairs." His mouth formed an O. His eyes formed two more. I went to the stone bus next to Carl's outstretched coffee and tipped it to see if it was attached to the base. It wasn't. The gentleman whose image had been carved into the marble must have been a happy guy. He had a huge, friendly smile on a round, mustached face. I figured Mr. Ziegler wouldn't have minded if I used his face as a battering ram were he still with us. It was for a good cause. "What's going on here?" Carl asked, fear tinging his whisper. "Wish I knew. But it's pretty exciting, right?" Exertion made the words come out strained. The bus slipped and almost dropped. Stone Mr. Ziegler was forced to face the wall while I took a moment to dry my hands off on my pants before trying again. My brother had been having me exercise regularly, but even so, it was all I could do to raise the old man's likeness over my head. "What are you—" "Oh, no," Carl exclaimed, pinching his eyes shut and gritting his teeth. I brought the bus down with all my strength, figuring that, if worse came to worse, he could live with a broken arm easier than a bullet-ridden body. The impact jarred me to my shoulders, and while I didn't get the result I had been hoping for, what I did get was good enough. The ice didn't break. The wall did. Carl's arm fell free, weighed down by ice and drywall. He grabbed his elbow but seemed to be okay. I set the smiling old man back on his stand, now sporting a broken front tooth. Maybe no one would notice? "Come on," I said, steering Carl toward the stairwell. "Tell the other guard to get up, to get help. Police, paramedics. But not to come up here. Mr. Harrison's orders. At least one guy is hunting for that girl you met a few minutes ago. He's armed and not too shy about it." "Will they try to shoot me?" I shrugged. "Maybe. Probably." I won't mention what Carl said in response. Let me just say he was sufficiently impressed and leave it at that. The important thing was, he seemed to take me at my word and would tell Brooke to get some backup before fleeing for his life. And an ice pick. I was honestly worried about frostbite at Carl's arm. I hoped his sleeve insulated it enough to prevent permanent damage. We reached the stairwell. My stomach growled again, painfully and insistently. I thought if I didn't hurry, my stomach was going to get sick of waiting and start snacking on surrounding organs. Fortunately, no one had aided and abetted the bad guys by leaving out a tempting snack of pancakes, or some eggs and sausage to distract me. Right then, had I stumbled upon an unattended bowl of dog food, I might have refigured my order of business and called a timeout until I had licked the bowl clean of crumbs. After a moment's consideration, I stripped off my socks and pocketed them. Running in socks was just too slippery. I needed to be able to move quickly. I told Carl, "Wait here. I'll make sure the coast is clear. Then you run out of here." He nodded. Standing on my tiptoes, I peered through the little window. Nothing. I eased the door open, intending to creep up to the railing and look for someone below. That mistake was almost my last. I hadn't checked behind the door. Before I registered the presence, a firm grip had me by the shoulder. Something hard dug into my side beneath my ribs. "Quiet," the man said into my ear. "Moving." My knees were already bent from attempting to be stealthy, so my assailant had no warning when I pushed up and slammed the top of my head into the bottom of his chin. Under the right circumstances, the sound of clacking teeth can be quite lovely. Whatever he said next was garbled from biting his tongue. Before he could recover from his surprise and remember he had a gun in his hand, I grabbed the door lever and swung it at him as hard as I could. He was leaning forward, holding his jaw just like most people do when they bite their tongues, and took the impact on the crown of his head. When the bad guy stumbled into the railing, I ducked back into the hallway. My hip clipped the door jamb on my way through, slowing me. My earbuds got caught in the closing door and were yanked from my waist. 2 rounds struck the door behind me, but unlike the walls, the far denser construction material kept them from penetrating all the way through. "If he follows me, you slip past," I hastily whispered to Carl. Crouched and pale-faced, the businessman gave me a shaky nod and a thumbs up. "That a boy, Carl." He was scared out of his wits, but still in the game. I had misjudged him. I spun and sprinted away. A peek over my shoulder showed my assailant bursting out of the stairwell in pursuit. My world reduced to nothing but heavy breathing and the pounding of feet for what seemed like minutes, but couldn't have been more than a handful of seconds. I took turns hard and at random, often rebounding off walls rather than chancing slowing down to change direction. It was all I could do to keep my lead. Along one particularly long corridor, I heard a couple of pops followed by the buzzing of bees slipping past. That's right, just bees, moving hundreds of miles an hour, made of metal and leaving holes in the scenic painting dead ahead before knocking it askew. After that, I didn't see a turn I didn't like. Eventually, I reached a familiar section of the floor. I pinballed around another corner and found Harrison right where I'd left him. His head hung low, and the butt of his gun was propped on the carpet beside his right leg, but he still had it aimed at the office where the gunman and the girl had last been spotted. I took that to mean they were still inside. When he registered my presence, Harrison perked up enough to swing the gun around. At the last instant, he recognized me and jerked the barrel upward. "I told you not to come back," Harrison said. He sounded tired and in considerable pain. I frantically pointed over my shoulder as I kept running toward him. I heard the guy from the stairwell rounding the corner not far behind me. Harrison's gun came back down. He twisted his upper body to square off his shoulders and used his opposite wrist to steady his aim. I dodged to the side, flattening myself against the wall to give him a clear line of sight. The stairwell goon reacted fast. He recognized the threat, pivoted, and dove back behind the turn in the hallway. Neither man pulled his trigger. I suspected Harrison, at least, was concerned about collateral damage. While these bad guys were using suppressors and could risk the moderate amount of noise, if Harrison fired a shot, there was no way it would go unheard. Perhaps most would take the smart approach and stay out of sight, but there might be a few that would choose to investigate. "You shouldn't be here," Harrison said. I went over and crouched near him. Both of us had kept our attention glued to the end of the hallway. "Sorry, I didn't think that's how this works," I said. "I got my job, same as you." He just shook his head in response. Then he said, "Is Carl still stuck? I'd almost forgotten about him." "No, he's delivering your message. The phones and elevator aren't working. That guy," I jerked my head in the direction I'd come from, "was waiting at the top of the stairs. Carl snuck out after I lured him away." Okay, that's something at least. I couldn't hear anything coming from the end of the hall, so I repositioned myself to watch our backs in case more assailants were hoping to sneak up on us. There was still plenty of noise coming from the large room Harrison had been shot in. I figured that much banging around was a good thing. It meant the girl hadn't been caught yet. "We can't stay here," I said. "You can't cover 2 directions at once." "Can you walk?" Harrison began, but I never found out the rest of what he had been about to say. He stopped speaking when the light suddenly went out. A second later, every deadbolt on the entire floor slammed home in unison. Stay tuned for Chapter 4.